Marsha Vanwynsberghe, thank you so much for coming on the Edison Podcast. Next time I'll get that really down, much faster.
It was really good effort, though. It was really good effort.
Vanwynsberghe. Yeah, Vanwynsberghe. See, it's not so hard. It's just
It's a lot of letters.
Mine's Parcaut. It's not as many letters, but nobody ever gets it right. So.
No, I know people didn't get my maiden name was Calvert, and nobody got that. It was like, it still is the same thing. It's Vanwynsberghe, but it's just, there's a lot of letters. So I resort to everything on my social media website is always Marsha Van W, because it just is easier. It stops at the W.
It would take everybody so long to type it out to find you.
It's a big name.
My kids, I adopted them, my wife's kids, and they have a Hawaiian name, original name, and it was Kamahala Umi or something like that. It was like, I think it was missing 2 characters of the alphabet. It was so big, and so they were happy to a certain point. But I like, if you ever want to go back, I don't care. That's not why I adopted you. I wanted to be your dad, and that's, I understand kids want things they don't have. Whether or not they should, that's just how we are as people.
It's so true. That is so true. That's how we're wired.
Yep. So you want somebody to get something from you, take it away from them. That's why you never tell your daughter, you can't date that person. You tell them, oh, please date that person.
See, I mean, I'm much older now, but even now my husband will joke and he'll say something. I'm like, did you say I can't do that? And he's like, no, I did not say that. That is not, because that would be my, okay, then I'm going to.
Exactly. Yeah. You want something done, tell them they can't do it.
Reverse psychology.
That's right. All right. So my listeners are, and that's one of the things you're not supposed to say. So I apologize, because when you talk to the people listening to you, you're supposed to communicate to them as as the individual. Being on radio, I used to call my listeners, and my producer would yell in my ear, "Stop saying that word!" Because when you say listeners, somebody goes, "Oh, he's talking about somebody else, not me." So when you talk to you, that person, so it always should be to that person. But they're not going to understand who you are in your background because they don't know you. I see by your thing that you're NLP trainer, speaker, podcast, author, coach. But how did you get down this journey on this road?
Oh, that's always the big question, isn't it? I was a registered kinesiologist for like 27 years. I was helping people learn how to rehab from injuries. Sometimes it was learning how to walk again. Sometimes it was learning how to move through fear. So I've been coaching in a lot of different ways for a lot of years. And probably about 13, 14 years ago, we started to experience teen substance abuse. Kind of came out of left field, not what we were expecting. And nobody plans on that. And we continued to do everything that we could to try and create change. And through the process, I started to share my story in small groups. And it was just supporting other parents at the school. I was having open conversations like with the school and with counselors, but in our personal lives, spending a lot of our time like hiding from others, because it was a really volatile time in our life. And we weren't hiding from the problem, just hiding from confrontation. And in the process, I came to a spot where I was like really tired of nobody wanting to talk about difficult things in life. And my counselor was like, well, maybe you're supposed to. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. There's no way I'm just going to stand up and talk about my story. And fast forward, that's essentially what happened. Is I started to share my story, my version. What do you do as a parent when your life plan doesn't go according to plan? When actually that's all of us. We're all walking through something that we didn't plan or set out. And so I started to speak on a little bit bigger stages and a couple collaborative chapters. Then wrote my own book, started my podcast, and in fast forward in 2020, I was in the space of having to, job loss, pandemic, 50 years old. What am I going to do? And then I went, maybe I'm supposed to do something full time with this. But during that process, ended up having an emergency back surgery during the pandemic and being in the hospital and saying, okay, so now I'm going to have to learn how to walk again myself after teaching people. And maybe I have to learn how to actually change the story, change the beliefs, change the patterns, because I've been in a space of pushing to constant burnout over and over and over. And so I really started to dive into NLP for myself, just to understand how my thoughts were working, what those beliefs were. And I spent the next couple of years really diving into that work. So the two worlds met each other. And now I really help people to kind of reframe their stories, their beliefs, understand how powerful their minds are, and share their stories. I work with a lot of people who are out there sharing what would be considered vulnerable stories. And they're the most relatable parts of all of our stories that connect us to each other.
And I totally agree. I was the most private person until I got on radio. Now everybody knows everything about me. And then I taught, my book came out, it's in there, the whole, how everything changed after my dad died, what I went through, all the different things. So, there's, there's a bunch of stuff that that you run into that you don't want to share, but you really need to share, and clients want to know that. So,
Mhm. It's what connects us. It is really what connects us. And I think I didn't know that at the time, but as I was in the process of, writing my story, I kept thinking, okay, well, my book is only going to connect with parents who are dealing with the story. And it didn't. It actually connected with so many people, because I started to realize, like, we all feel, like, we connect on emotions, we connect on stories, we connect on experiences. It doesn't have to be the same story. And like, it doesn't at all. And so that really started to open up my eyes about, like, what if we can actually start to normalize these difficult conversations? So back in 2017, I had no idea what I was doing, and I started my own podcast. And I just really became curious and really wanting to create a space where I could help people to share their story of what they walk through. And it allowed me to connect with a lot of people who not only were open of sharing their story, but they're doing something in the world today because of their story. Like, their story came in, created major changes in their life, and now they're actually doing something kind of purpose, mission driven because of what they walk through.
because I do another podcast called Helping the Brave, and it's for us veterans once we take our uniform off, because we lose our purpose once we do
Yeah.
that, and we have to relearn what we want to do. And not only
Mhm.
that, if you ever got injured, you're dealing with PTSD, a bunch of other stuff. And so that's my big push these days, is helping
Wow.
vets, period.
Yes.
We put a fire walk together for veterans the April 12th and 13th of this year, where we did two motivational speaker each night, and then at the end of each night they walked on coals, two separate groups, and it really changed a lot of lives. So
That's incredible. I actually interviewed Dave Albin, who does a
yep.
lot of
That's he came out. I hired him to come out and run ours. Yeah.
amazing, amazing. And I mean, his show is one of my top downloaded ones because he's got quite a story. But he definitely understanding, like, that piece of it, like what Firewalk can do, but
Mhm.
also bringing people together, because bringing people together and realizing, like, again, I think we're so much more connected than what we realize. And I think that so many people are craving more connections, but we don't know how to allow ourselves to be fully seen, right? It feels not safe to do that.
Yeah, and you have to. I mean, that's when I stopped this podcast for 6 months because people didn't want to talk about their failures.
Wow.
And or they would give you a little one. But it's like, you guys got, in order for people to follow you and they don't need to know who you are. They need to
Yep.
know that you've been through something, so they can take your advice, because it happened to you. And that's when I talk about, I'm in the mortgage industry. When I talk to clients, I say there's no judgment here. If it happened to you, I guarantee it happened to me.
Yeah.
And I've been through it all. And when I wrote my book, that was in there, and they were like, and there's stuff I didn't tell anybody,
Yeah.
and it's in my
Same.
book, and and that helps out a lot. But it's like, people just don't understand. We've been through it. I understand. There's no judgment on my side, because let's just fix it and move on.
Mm. But that's really freeing. And I feel like that's not the normal conversation yet. I really feel like we're working towards, how can we have, like, less judgment, less criticism, less, like, there's so much of that anyways. There really is. But I feel like if we can get to a space of sharing more of who we are and being able to share those parts of ourselves, it you can build some of the best connections ever. Like, I look at the people that are in my life today, they were not here 5 years ago. They weren't here. And I don't even know where I'd be without some of them. And we think that like I say we think, a lot of people feel like we build those relationships when everything is perfect. And it's not true. I think you actually build some of the best relationships with people when that you let them see you in your mess. Like you let them see you in your moments where it's real. That's authentic.
Right. And you don't know who your friends really are until you go through something.
And I
It's
think that's, you just nailed something right there. You really did, because I would have sworn up and down a decade ago that the people that were in my life were like the people. And no, and now that's also important though, is I can look at a lot of those people now. I don't hold anything against them. They were in my life reasons, seasons, or lifetimes. Literally every single time something happens with a person, I'm like, oh, that was a reasons person. I was meant to learn something from them, or that was a seasons person. We don't have like our lifetime people. They're meant to be on probably less than two hands. We're not meant to have every single person in our life for the whole time. Everybody's here teaching us something. We're here learning all the time.
I mean, your best friend is somebody that you can call up in the middle of the night that you got arrested and come bail you out. That's how you know who your true friend is.
And they don't ask you a question.
No, they say, I'm here to help you and get you out of here. Let's go.
Well, and they're also the ones who I'm sure
And
you
there's not many of those anymore.
No, I have a couple. I really do have a couple of friends. It could be months since I've talked to them. And I will send a message and it's like, do you have a few minutes? And they're like, yeah, give me a call. Like, it's just because they know that there's no hard feelings. It's just this unwritten, like understood that we're there to support each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But going back to what you said,
Before we move on to that, and if you have to work at the relationship,
mm-hmm,
it's not a good relationship.
mm-mm. I've severed a couple of ties where I had one person send me a message say, it has been like 285 days since you have responded to my message. We haven't talked yet. And I was just like, oh, it's going to be actually 286 because this is not going to work. Like I had no idea. And you know what? We don't know what someone else is going through. We have no idea.
Right.
And so, no, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. I don't judge anybody. But people judge me all the time, and that's okay. They're not people I need in my life. And people don't understand that. It's like, I don't need you in my life. If you're going to give me trouble, and I don't care if you're my kid, my mom, my grandma, grandpa, I don't care who you are. If you don't help me, I'm not going to talk to you. I don't need to talk to you. I love my sister to death, my older one, but she is the worst at it. She'll complain that I didn't call her on her birthday. Well, you didn't call me on mine for years, and I don't complain about it. And then, then she wants to talk for hours. I talk all day long, either on the phone, on this. I don't want to be on the phone at night. I want to sit next to my wife. We can have our conversation. I do not want to be on a phone.
I hear you. I do. I hear you.
Yeah. And if you can't understand that, that's your problem, not mine.
So that's interesting though, because I'm sure people are listening and wondering in the sense, like, how do you do that and put those boundaries into place when it's family? Because I had to draw some big lines. I did some really big lines. And in the beginning, I was in a space of like wanting to have people get it. I needed them to understand. And then finally I hit a point where it's like, oh my gosh, Marsha, you're wasting so much energy and time trying to make everyone understand what you're living in and walking through, when does it really matter? Like, it doesn't really matter. It's when you're in a low spot in life, I find you recognize, like, I only have X amount of energy. And I actually just started to call it's like, this is my inner circle. This is an invite only space, invite only. And if you continue to come into this space and only take, but don't know how to give, or like give that support and just want to take or add judgment, criticism, like, yeah, no, you don't get a pass. Like, you just don't get a pass. That's how much work it took to get to now. Like, and I just want to clarify that, because I know with my story, I don't want to say it in a light way that, yes, we dealt with this and now I'm here. It was messy for a lot of years. Like, you have to be okay with doing it wrong to figure out what's going to work for you to decide how you're going to handle it. That means that, more boundaries come in place. People who've been in your life for a long time, as you said, it's like, no, we actually can't have a conversation right now because I'm trying to survive and I can't cope. I can't deal with your energy right now. And so it requires a lot of that learning in order to get to a space where like I actually feel peace now. It's not perfect, but I feel peace. And that is something it's taken me a big chunk of my life to learn.
I don't deal with guilt. That's what people do. So people who have that problem usually have guilt. And I don't care what your religion is. I know Catholics have it worse, but that's beside the point. That's how they work off of everything. And no offense to anybody who's a Catholic. It's just my wife was a Catholic, and we could get into a whole discussion. Her dad was a priest, but we won't get into that. Yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing that you have is you have to understand that you can't be, if a lot of people use guilt to control people, and you have to get over that and you have to move on from that. It takes a lot to understand and be strong and go through this. And it's something you have to work on. I know we're here to talk about you, but we're stuck kind of on this whole thing about having a conversation is you need to figure out your life before you can figure out anything else. It does help to have that partner in your life that has the same views of you on this. My wife does, but to a certain point, almost too far. What I mean by that is you piss her off about something, she'll write you off. Right. And I don't do that. And she could do that to our kids, but to a certain point, and I remember when they're younger and I'm like, okay, our kids are going to do this. This is what kids do. I did it. You did it. You did it. You just didn't get caught. These kids have no freedom like we had. They have these cell phones, everything else. People are videotaping them, showing videotaping. That tells you how old I am, recording them, and it gets posted everywhere so we can find it. And so we didn't have that. We could get away with stuff because nobody was around to tell on us.
I couldn't agree more. Like, I mean, we grew up in a time where we didn't have phones as kids, and my kids didn't have it until they were even young teens. But it was very much, I remember my husband saying to me once, he's like, no, Marsha, I did those things. I just didn't, it wasn't recorded and posted. Like nobody saw it.
Yeah.
Nobody saw it. And so I think that's also a reminder. It's very, very different time. Very different time.
I mean, they used to have to remind our parents, do you know where your kids are at 10 o'clock at night?
I know.
I don't know if you did it in Canada, because I know you're in Canada, but in the States.
We had it.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
Yeah. We came in when it was dark. Like literally, it's just what we did. We came in when it was dark. It's a very different time. I understand it's a very different time. But there's also a lot of things like that's another whole conversation, but phones have not always brought out the best. Again, they need boundaries just like people do. I think our phones need boundaries and limits just like we do with people. And, I get some people will say my Instagram is like full of all of this and this and this, and I don't want it. I'm like, well, somewhere along the way you did, because your Instagram is literally showing you what you're looking for. Right. Like it does. It's like, it's literally what we're thinking. Our social media is our algorithm of what we're thinking, because it's right there for us.
Or if you just happen to look at it one time, forever. Yeah.
It's like, so true.
It's like, yeah, I mean, yes, and the phones do listen, just so you know.
They do. We laugh about that sometimes, though. We do laugh about it. My husband's like, what do you think about this backpack? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And like, I go to my Instagram and I look and I'm like, is this the one you just mentioned? Because we didn't even type it in anywhere. Like, we just
it's always listening. And that's why, like, when I'm done for the day, I leave my business phone in my office and I walk out, and then I have another phone, which my wife calls her boyfriend's phone, that nobody has the number to. Just I think our kids might have it, but they probably wouldn't remember it because they'd have to record it, save it in their phone, So
there was a time when we were younger that I actually had to, we knew phone numbers, right?
Yeah, but I mean, we didn't have that many people call.
No.
Yeah. And we had a phone book, and everybody was in it. You were somebody if you're in the phone book. I love The Jerk, the movie. When he's talking about, I'm in the phone book. I'm in the phone book.
It keeps it interesting.
Yeah. All right. So you tell people story. You help them tell their story. That's one of the things we were talking about. NLP trainer. I love our conversation we're having, but I kind of want to know a little bit more. What do you do necessarily with the NLP? Is it just to help them tell their story, or how are you using it today?
With the NLP tools, so neuro-linguistic programming tools, is really understanding how our brain works and how our beliefs are built and how we can change those beliefs. And what is happening is at the subconscious level, right? That's our subconscious mind is like 95% of where all of our limiting beliefs sit. And our conscious mind is our 5%. That's our go getter, right? Our goal setter. So it's like that's the person that's like setting the goals and doing a vision board and doing it, which is great. But if you don't believe that it's possible, then those two things are always a tug of war, and your subconscious mind will always win. So really what I do is there's a lot of different NLP tools that we use, but it helps people to release like stuck, trapped emotions, stories that we've told ourselves, limiting beliefs, those limiting decisions that have held us back. So instead of just thinking like saying an affirmation to change a thought process, it's actually using tools to help you to change it at the root so that you can see it differently, which will help you to move towards what you're trying to create. So it's interesting because when I first started, I spent my life as the fighter, right? I was just the fighter female. I really was. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to write my book. I'm going to do this and I'm going to get over this thing and I'm going to figure this out. And what was happening is I was never addressing like the amount of guilt that I felt and the frustration and shame in our story. I had to learn how to release that. I had made stories about my story mean something about me. And this is what we do as humans. Something that didn't go the way that we planned. And now all of a sudden we have subconsciously told ourselves a story. That's not for me. I'm not good enough. Who am I to? I'm at fault. All these things. And then over here, we're striving like crazy to try and create something, which is amazing, but we haven't dealt with some of these beliefs. So there's a lot of different tools that we use to help change what that story is, to see it differently. It really does help promote with healing as well. And then we use what they're called subconscious reprogramming tools, where it's just things like EFT tapping and hypnosis and subliminals to really anchor into the beliefs that you do want to have as opposed to the ones that you're trying to avoid.
What's EFT?
Emotional freedom techniques. So that is tapping. So you end up hitting 8 different points along the meridian in the body, which is like getting full body acupuncture. There's only one way to explain it. It's like, or the other way to explain it is our old TVs where they had the whole back of it was open. You know how it used to get the fuzziness on the screen? You take a screwdriver in, sometimes that would like, you could change what was happening on the screen. You're literally changing within the body the neurological and electrical charge that you're feeling because we're holding on to those emotions and they become part of our identity. So it's a tool and technique that we use to help people to change the story that they're telling themselves.
See, I would never take a screwdriver to the back of one of those old TVs because of that condenser in there. It could destroy you. First thing I thought, because I knew electronics and like, stay away from that because that'll kill you.
Well, it's so funny because that's the example they gave us when we took our training. And I laughed because I'm thinking the person who's teaching it, I'm like, did you even have a TV that looked like that in the back? Because if you did, you would have never stuck a screwdriver in it because I had one.
Yeah. And the back never came off. They had a piece of cardboard there so you wouldn't get it back. And it was thicker than cardboard, but it
weighed 5,000 pounds.
Oh yeah. I had a 32-inch TV tube, like in the 2000s, and that thing was so heavy, compared to TVs today that are, so light and,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a lot of what I do, but it really does help you to change that story. Like as an example, if I be open and vulnerable and share, for me, I was in a space of wanting to share my story, put it out there, help other people, which is really what my intention was. Subconsciously, this story was still going that I had failed as a parent. And because if of course I failed as a parent, because if I hadn't failed as a parent, I wouldn't be dealing with what we had dealt with. And logically, that doesn't make sense, but you can see how we hold on to those beliefs. And I really had to start to unpack that and start to see that, okay, that is what was driving the wheel. Because if you feel like that's what's driving the wheel, then you will work like crazy to prove that no, I'm good. I'm doing it, because you're trying to disprove those beliefs that you have in yourself. And so we're just interesting creatures, and our brains are built to keep us safe. There's nothing wrong with this. They're just built to keep us safe. So how can we build more safety within ourselves so that we can continue to go after and do the things that we want to do?
Yeah. I just think we fake it as parents, just like our parents faked it as parents too, I mean, we do the best we can. We're not going to be perfect. There's nothing we can do about it. We're going to mess up.
Mm-hmm.
You can read all the books, you can read everything. It's not going to help you with reality sometimes. Because I watch some of these people, oh, we were doing it this way and we're going to do this way. Okay, talk to me in like 5 years.
Oh yeah, no,
Talk to me when your daughter turns 12 and we'll talk.
because the rules change then.
Oh my God.
They changed. Trust me.
I had three of them. I had 3 of them.
Did you really?
Yeah. So 2 of them, one of them, we ripped her door off and took everything out of her room because, she did stupid stuff. Well, that's how kids are going to be. You have to more, and that's just how kids are. And it's worse today because they look at stuff on Instagram, to TikTok, all those different places and think it's reality, or they watch 16 and, those stupid shows, and they think that that's how reality is. No, that's not. And people don't realize that on all social media, there's only 10% of the whole population posting stuff on there.
Is that the number now? I knew it was low.
Yeah,
Wow.
10%. And you're getting your news from 10% of the people out there. The other 90 is not doing anything on there. So stop looking at this stuff. And that's what, people get mad. I go, I don't consume it. I produce it. I don't consume it because, and don't be wrong, occasionally I'll go through TikTok, but it's not something I want to look. Facebook, I never look at. And I do so many lives on there and everything else. And everybody's like, did you see so-and-so's post? No. And that was just like email. I get so many emails. People go, did you get my email? I go, no, I wait until my staff goes, did you get my email? And then I look at it because there's nothing in there that's that important. If it's so important, you're going to call me, because if it's not that important, you're going to send an email.
Isn't that something though? Like, I think that's really powerful when you talk about the numbers there. And I think it's funny because the people who might appear to be very active online, like you're sharing a lot online. I share a lot online. A lot of times people assume that you're always on and consuming. And I'm like, no, I'm not actually. I'm actually not. It might look like it because I'm fairly consistent with what I put there, but I try so hard to be intentional. I think our phone is a tool that we can be intentional with. If we're not intentional, then that tool uses us instead of us using that tool.
What's the difference? We didn't grow up with it. It was like, I remember when pagers came out. This is how old I am. And then people, like tech, and then all of a sudden 911. What's up? Oh, what'd you want for dinner? It's not a 911. I love the fact that, when you'd leave whatever, nobody could get a hold of you. Now people can. And that's why, and if you don't have your phone, oh, where's my phone? You always, you leave the house with your phone. You could leave your kids at the house, but you're going to take your phone with you. And it's like, okay, we got to get back to where it's important, but it's not everything.
I think that says it right there. We were just at a retreat in Sedona, probably in June. And it was interesting because we had no internet coverage for like the first 3 days. And the first day was like, this is weird. Like, I don't know what to do. It's kind of weird. And then, like, I think once you can actually do a little detox off of, you start to recognize it's like, wow, like that actually feels good that no one can reach me. It feels good that I have a break. So how can we put those things in place for ourselves now? Like I deal with a lot of different people, a lot of different stories. I have some incredible clients. I have some, in the beginning, I was definitely answering left, right, and center for clients. And it was like, okay, wait, I'm not going to last. This is not going to work. There still has to be some boundaries in place. So you learn as you go and you do it. But I love most of my clients now, and if they message me, it'll be like, I know this is after hours. You do not have to answer. I just wanted to send this for later. And sometimes, you know what? I'll go in and I'll just spend half an hour and answer messages. And they're like, you don't have to do that. I'm like, I don't have to do anything. If I don't want to, I'm not going to. Like, that's just how my relationship is with it.
Yeah. And one of my clients in the mortgage industry, it's like, I'm not available in the evening 2 nights a week. Occasionally I work late, Tuesday, Thursday till 7.
Mhm.
If I do, but then, my whole day is different. But the weekends is no, unless we set something up. But sometimes I'll see it, do something on my phone, I'll see a text and I'll reply, and I'm just saying, just so you know, this is outside of the norm. You're not going to always be able to
Yeah.
get a hold of me on the weekend. So
Yeah.
don't assume. And some people, and I think that's important to know, that the people who have to get a hold of you are not the people you want to work with.
No. No.
People who do not understand boundaries are the people you do not want to work with.
No, but that comes back to something you said in the very beginning. It's like knowing yourself, knowing like how you work best. Because some people love that. I don't want that. I don't want that kind of setup and arrangement. I really don't. We actually had a client that we stopped working with earlier in the year because it was like emails would come in on Sunday, and then like there'd be like 4 or 5 emails all Sunday saying you're not responding. And I wasn't, because I didn't have my phone. And I would look at it Monday morning and they would be furious that I waited a whole day. And I'm like, okay, how did we get here? Because this is not going to work. It's just not. And it's like, you have to know what works for you. Without changing some of those stories and limiting beliefs, though, I can tell you honestly, that fighter that was there for most of my life trying to prove that she could do it, she was a people pleaser too. Oh, she would be like, okay, yeah, no, whatever you need, I got it. And because I was always in a space of proving. So whatever those stories are that we have running on rampant, until you go to the root and you make the change in the story, it's going to continue. It's going to continue. And it means that what you're doing is not going to be sustainable in the long run until you really start to change what that story is.
I totally agree. It's wanting to be wanted and not needed, and
So
that's the
good.
difference. And people, I mean, I ran into this in my Rotary, because I was president of my Rotary for the last year, I think, and it's like another part-time job. And I'm
Mhm.
happy that I'm no longer doing that. But I had one of those people in there that's handling some of the stuff for us that we're trying to move away from her. She has to be needed and sets things up to where you have to go through her to do certain things. That's not how you want to be in life. So if that's
Mhm.
somebody who you are, you need to go get help.
Mhm.
And I
It's
don't
not.
mean that negatively.
No.
That means something happened in your life and you haven't dealt with it yet. Go
Yeah.
deal with that, please. You'll be happier, and everybody in your life will be happier.
Yeah, that's another story. We all have a lot of stories that have been running on repeat. We really do. But that's like, I've come across people that needed to be needed. And it's not sustainable. Like long term, I many times is that like, I love what I do now. I love the work that I get to do. But I also recognize, like, if I want to love this long term, there has to be some boundaries in place,
Mhm.
because we can't keep giving to everyone else and not like putting back into ourselves, because there's nothing left. Like we're always on like the cup is bone dry, and we're in this space of like, I can't sustain this. So it's been a really interesting. I feel like I've learned most of my lessons in my life have been like from 50 over, to be honest.
Well, everything's changed. Everything's easier to do now and harder to do.
Mhm.
Meaning that it's so much easier to start a business, do all the different stuff, but it's also easy not to do anything because all the stuff that we have access to. And you have to be focused on what you want and know what you want. You need to, in business, you need to know who your perfect client is, and people don't know who their perfect client is, and they go to everybody. And I've been really pushing this lately, because even myself, I do mortgages, but I do it for, I'll do whatever. But really, I've really focused now, niche back down to how I was when I first got in the business, which is helping veterans and
Mhm.
also doing reverse mortgages, because they both deal with dignity. And that's
Mhm.
what I deal with.
That's beautiful. Like, it's beautiful. Like, but you have to learn who that is and who you want to help and what you want to do.
Mhm.
And I tend to attract a lot of really big stories. Like, they're big, they're heavier stories. And they're also people who want to do something with them. They feel called to share it with them. So, for example, one of the questions somebody will ask me is like, how do you know if a person's ready to share or do something with their story, or if they're not? Like, I can usually tell you in the first like 2 minutes, because if a person comes in very angry, very victim mindset from their story, trying to prove, trying to be like, that's not the time to share. That's the time to work on yourself. There's nothing wrong with being in that space. I was there for a really long time. But it's really about doing that work on yourself first, so that when you are sharing your story where you leave everyone else in integrity, right? Like, we want to share lessons, we want to share experiences and what we've learned with people, not the details of the story. I didn't even share much details of my story. You don't have to. It's not the details. It's that experience and the emotions and what you learn through it. That's what can help others.
Right. Marsha, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How do people find you? So I know you have a book you keep talking about, but you didn't say the name of the book. And I know you have a podcast and you didn't say the name of the podcast. So give us those things. And I'll also have them in the show notes, but
Okay.
can you tell us those things now
Yep.
for people listening?
First of all, absolutely. My book is called When She Stopped Asking Why, because the why was killing me. Like it was absolutely killing me. I needed to know why. And that was a turning point, was when it's like, the why doesn't matter. The why doesn't matter. It's not helping me change anything or move forward. And so you can find that on Amazon and on my website, which is Marsha Van W. And I've made it very easy. Even if you just went to Google and you start typing Marsha Van W, it comes up. And it'll come up with all of my social media, et cetera, my website as well. And my podcast is called Own Your Choices, Own Your Life. And we are into episode like 740-ish or something like that. I don't know. I love that podcast. I love being able to connect and share stories.
Weekly release?
Yeah, I have 2 solos a week and 1 interview a week that comes out.
So 3.
Mm-hmm.
3 a week.
3 a week.
Wow. You're almost as glutton for punishment as I am.
That's why I laughed when you said that in the beginning. I'm like, oh, I relate. I don't know why. I do like it. And if I didn't like it, I wouldn't do it.
Right.
But I do like it.
Yeah. So I like my morning one we do for real estate. We call it, so the radio show I have is called Real Estate Jerky. We give you something to chew on. And it came from an old blog I did so long ago. And then when they asked me to come on radio, I'm like, they go, what should we name it? They were coming up. I'm going, well, I'm just going to say this. You say yay or nay. I said Real Estate Jerky. They're like, oh my God, we can do Smokehouse Studio. We can do all, and it's exactly what they did. And
Oh,
so
really?
it was worked really well. Yeah. Because, and gives you something to chew on. That's an old, thing.
Yep.
And then so my lives during the week at 8:30 in the morning are Real Estate Jerky Daily. They're the daily show. And I tell people, if you're going to start a podcast now, do a daily. Monday, whatever that is. If that's Monday through Friday, great. If it's Monday through Sunday, that's whatever. You can always record and drop it later, but it really gets you going and practicing, and there's less competition in the dailies.
I think you nailed it. It's like when I started from 2017 to 2020 was random. I'm going to say it was random. Maybe 2019, I was doing 1 episode a week for sure. 2020 hit, and I had a mentor at the time, and he said, knowing what I know now, I would have done like daily podcasts. I would have just gotten in the habit of doing it.
Yeah.
So how can you stretch yourself a little bit? So in 2020, I started doing 2 solos a week. They're like 10, 15 minutes. And then the 1 interview. And I've stuck with it since then. So it's been 4 years of the 3 episodes a week. If you want to get better at something, you have to do it. Like it is interesting, right? People will say, how do I do the podcast? How do I get better at it? Like how fast before I can start to monetize it? I'm like, if that's your only question, I would honestly not start it. I really wouldn't.
My goal wasn't monetizing. My goal was to share people's stories.
Yeah.
And I'm inquisitive. I want to know why people do what they do, period. What used to get me in trouble at different parties and stuff, my wife would grab my leg, like tell me to shut up and stop asking questions, because I want to know why people voted the way they did. Not because I think they're dumb for voting. I want to understand people and why you did that. Because I'm inquisitive. And that's why people ask me, one of my coaches, like, I'm like, I don't even know what I do anymore. And he's like, you don't see it? And I go, no, I don't. And he goes, you tell people stories across multiple mediums.
Yeah.
It's like, holy, I didn't think about that in the mortgage industry, to getting their loan and everything else. And so that's what I tell people I do. I help them, I tell their stories, and that's what I like to do.
That's beautiful. I love it. I love it. Honestly, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to come across somebody else who has that drive for their show as well.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people doing podcasts, but a lot of people, this is going to come off wrong, don't know how to do it and get better at it, and then do a lot. Because I created so much content with doing lives, and people like, you can't, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. I go, yes, you're right. But in order to get good at it, you have to practice and you have to do it. Because I have people look at my stuff and they're like, man, you're so comfortable behind there. It wasn't always that way. I was on live radio. You mess up, people know about it. And and that's the lives that we do. Those are live because they're called lives for a reason.
That would be experience. I was on live radio once. They interviewed me and asked over the phone and said, wait, like I think they want to make sure I wasn't a crazy mom, because they wanted to talk about parents and dealing with substance abuse. And we finished about 2 minutes later, and he's like, never mind, can you be here live tomorrow morning? And I'm like, I've never done live radio. Like, I wasn't sure about that. It went great, and it was a great experience to be part of it. But you're right. Like, yeah, I've done consistent podcasts since 2017, but from 2014 to 2017, I was doing very regular lives, like very regular Facebook lives. And so it is putting in the hours, and you have to be willing to learn and let it be messy as you go.
Right. And just go. Nobody cares. Only you care.
Oh,
And people prefer perfect editing. And a lot of people ask me, do you take out uhs and that? I go, no, just learn how not to do them.
isn't that's very true? That is very, very true. It's very true.
I'm not, and it's not being a jerk about it. It's just, I want it to be natural. I don't want to edit anything, because you'll see, a little glitch like that I just did with my head, and then it was edited. I don't want to see that.
No, it's interesting. Even just this week. Okay. So like probably 1,000 podcast episodes total I've done. And my podcast manager messaged me, and she's like, okay. And I always open for opinions. And she said, I notice you say this. You've said it a lot in the last couple of episodes, just for your own, because I don't know, like once I finish recording, it's off it goes. She probably hears my stuff more than anyone else, but that's how we learn. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to consciously be aware of what I was saying.
Like, right's not good to say, because if you like, right? No, you're trying to get somebody to justify what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
You see it all the time.
You actually probably know a lot more, pardon me, about like NLP is languaging and words and how you speak, and how you can have a conversation where it's like, you're engaging a question or you're making statements.
Mhm.
And so just because of the amount that you've already spent talking and doing episodes, you probably do way more of it than what you realize.
I'm sure I do. And plus, I thought Zig Ziglar was my guy, and everybody else in the sales industry. I learned from sales and how to do certain things. And so I'm sure I picked it up. Plus, a good friend of mine is Brian Galke, and he can subtleskills.com.
Mhm.
Check it out, everybody. He can tell you everything about you by looking at your eyebrows, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, the way that
Mhm.
ridges. He perfect. You're like,
Wow.
wow. And it's just what he's learned, and it helps everybody. And I tell everybody they should learn it, so that way you can have a conversation with anybody and help that, when you're trying to get whatever you're trying to get across to that person, you can relay it the way they want to hear it, so that they can understand it.
Well, communication's everything. And so it's actually, can I give you one little weird stat when it comes to NLP? So words are only 7% of our communication. Like tonality is like 38%. So tonality, how I say my words, the emphasis, and then physiology is like 50, is it 58 is the difference? So it's like 58% or 55% is physiology. So you can tell a lot by a person by how they engage, how they, physiology, how they show up, the energy that they carry themselves with. So it is really fascinating. You can learn a lot about how people are listening and paying attention, just by their body language, not just their words alone.
Wow. Maybe I'll just take a course and make sure I know what it is.
I think probably more than you think.
Marsha, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Again, I'll have all your information in the show notes. Everybody, you can go down to the show notes to get connected with her. And again, Marsha, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Ed.
My pleasure.